Hi everybody, this is a video response to Jack with his Together for Peace channel, who made not one but two video responses to my video on heaven. I can't think what it was called, even though it was only about 3 days ago. That's got to tell you something about me, hasn't it? But it was to do with the horror of heaven and the horror of the infinite, effectively. So look, I'm going to crack on with this because a lot to fit in, so let me play you a clip of Jack straight off the bat.
NoelPlum99 posted up a video. He creates his own understanding of heaven, not based upon Christian teachings. From this, he formulates some questions. The second and very uncommon approach to a conversation regarding heaven would be something along the lines of, Jack, I'd be interested to hear what Christianity has to say regarding heaven. Can you give me some, what does the Bible teach regarding heaven?
Okay, well, I understand the point you're making, Jack, but I think it's a dirty game you're playing here, and I think it's a game that you're very, very comfy with, too comfy with, because you've played it too many times in the past. And this is this kind of game of theological whack-a-mole. Whichever heaven I go for, you can just point to another one. You can point to the early Christianities and ideas of a dour, mundane, materialistic, bodily resurrection with a kingdom of heaven here on earth. Or you can look at the word spirit and soul in the Bible from the Greek pneuma and look at the original definition of the word pneuma, and you can talk about a perfect pneumatic body. It's still a bodily resurrection, but not in our dour earthly bodies. It's going to be a pneumatic body, a perfect body, but still a physical resurrection. Or you can look at more modern translations of the word spirit and soul, decontextualize it if you like, and you can talk about some heavenly realm and a utterly immaterial, spiritual, soulful resurrection, if you like, or afterlife. You see, this is the point, Jack. I could have gone for what it says in Scripture, and you can say, well, that might be what it says in Scripture, but that's not traditional Christian doctrine, or it's not what contemporary Christians believe. I could have gone for what contemporary Christians believe, and you just levelled at me that that's not traditional doctrine. It's not what it says in Scripture, and I could have gone for traditional doctrine, and you'll say, well, that's only an interpretation of Scripture. It's not the Scripture itself, and in any case, it's not what contemporary Christians believe. You see, you seem to know so much about what Christians believe, and you could have told me it all. This is what you're telling me, Jack, but it's bullshit. You talk about hell, and you say, you know, hell is actually just, it's just separation from God. Well, that's not what a lot of Protestant denominations believe, is it, Jack? They believe in a lake of fire. They believe in burning and suffering and torment and torture as punishment for sin for all of eternity. And it's not what the Eastern Orthodox Church, the second biggest Christian denomination in the world, absolutely disagrees with you. Hell is not separation from God for them. For them, whether you're in heaven or in hell, you are with God. It's just the kind of flavour of your experience of God that differs. So you're in no place to talk about this, are you? Because you've just done the same kind of thing you've accused me of. You see, what I wanted to do in my video was to make it so generic, such a generic notion of heaven, that the likes of you, Jack, wouldn't be able to pick it apart in that kind of way. And you know what I think you've done? I think you're so used, you see a video on heaven and you think, right, stock answer, he's talking about heaven, let's just tell him that he's talking about the wrong heaven. I couldn't have made my video any more generic than I did. The only characteristic of heaven that was important in my video was that it's eternal. That's it, that it lasts for an infinite period of time. Later on in this video I'm going to discuss the notion of an eternal heaven a little bit more, but for now it's a heaven that encompasses an infinite period of time. That's it. It doesn't matter what else you want to believe about heaven. If you want to believe fucking beer fountains, strippers and 72 virgins like Muslims believe, or some Muslims believe, if you want to believe that it's all about being with God, that it's this kind of beatific vision in the Catholic sense, that it's all about just being one with God, it doesn't matter. The same argument applies to all of them. Or at least that's what I thought. Turns out that I'm wrong, according to you, Jack. So, look, I hope I've given you a grounding why I kind of object. I'm kind of a little bit niggled I'd gone to such effort. There was a guy called the TED Project or something. He's done a video response to both our videos. He brings this idea in about sin, about how all the things we enjoy, a lot of them class as sinful, so we aren't going to be able to do them in heaven. So that again drags us even further away from what we actually are. But I didn't do that because I thought if I include sin, then that gives you a bit of a get out, and I don't want to give you that get out of saying, oh, that isn't my heaven, that's somebody else's heaven that you're criticising. I tried to make it so generic, Jack, and it exasperates me that even though I did that, you've just made the same kind of video that I expected people like you to make. No, NoelPlum, that's the wrong kind of heaven. Okay, well look, I've got that out the way. I was a bit niggled by all of that. And I'd really like to address some of the other points that you made in your video. Unfortunately, I didn't fucking understand them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it here, just in case there's somebody on the internet who can interpret what the fuck you were going on about.
But within the framework of Christianity, it's consistent, it's coherent. When you grant the points that sustain the system, when you grant the words that sustain the system, that give the sense of meaning to heaven and God and Jesus Christ and what this is about, then although you may scoff at it and think that it's stupid and silly, you cannot reject the fact that if these were to be granted, it's understandable why it would not be an issue.
I've watched that a dozen times, Jack, and I've got to say that's a real head-scratcher. I don't know what the hell you're going on about. There's a part of me that thinks that you're trying to say is that Christianity is in some way internally consistent. But if that's all you're trying to say, why not just say it? I don't know, so I'm assuming there's something bigger, more grandiose than that, but I can't fathom it out, I'm afraid. It just sounds like a load of old waffle. At one point, I don't know if it's in that clip or another bit, you talk about if we only just allow you to ascribe the correct definitions to certain terms, then it all will pan out. But it's not a semantic argument we're talking about. I'll give you whatever definitions you want as long as we're both working to the same definitions, but the definitions don't matter. If you want to define a sausage as a strip of cured pork, and if you want to define bacon as a cylindrical offal tube, that's fine. But it just means if I want a bacon sandwich, I have to ask for a sausage sandwich. If I want a sausage sandwich, I have to ask for a bacon sandwich. This is not a semantic argument. I'll grant you your definitions, but let's know what those definitions are, then we can have the debate, can't we? Look, I didn't really see anything else that I could comment on your video, so I want to do two things. I want to briefly sketch out what my position is, because other people like Nicotine, Healthy Addict, lots of people have chimed in on this and given the argument their own flavour. But for me, I want to keep it on a very narrow path, so it can't be pushed to one side with these ideas of this isn't my heaven, this isn't my hell. You get my picture. So let me give you that outline, then I want to deal with 3 objections that have been raised and go through them. So let me try and just encapsulate what my original argument was as briefly as possible. There was just one characteristic of heaven which was important. The rest of it's totally up for grabs, Jack. You can have it however you want it. We've gone through some of the alternatives early on in this video, but you have it however you want it, Jack, as long as it's eternal, as long as it stretches on forever and ever and ever and ever. And if you're one of these kind of people who can fall truly, madly, deeply in love with someone and then get married, as some people do, and suddenly feel trapped by the whole thing and the marriage falls apart on the back of it, imagine how trapped some people are going to feel when they find out that they're in a heaven, however marvellous it is, and it's going to go on forever and ever ever and ever, and there is absolutely no escape from it under any circumstances. That was it. That's all I was concerned about. Everything else is up for grabs. Same with hell. The hell thing was a bit of a bolt-on, to be honest. But the only characteristic of hell, we don't have to go down the Hieronymus Bosch line of devils with little pointy sticks jabbing you in the bottom. All it has to be is not a very nice place. The kind of place you really, really wouldn't want your friends and relatives and loved ones to have to be in while you're lapping up the glory of God, praising him, living with him, worshipping him, just enjoying being around him in heaven. That was it. That's all you've got to go on, Jack. So if you're saying that mine isn't appropriate, well, that's all you've got to go on. From that, I drew the point, not could God make us heaven compliant. I'm sure he could if he's omnipotent. Now the question was, how much of us would have to change for that process to take place? And then from that, the third point was, would that still class as us, or wouldn't it? Would the changes be so great that it wouldn't? You couldn't still regard the entity at that point as us. The final point was that if we were so immunised for such changes to take place to immunise us from heaven, perhaps we really shouldn't give a shit about hell anymore, because the kind of things which would have made hell so bad, well, we've been immunised from them now in the changes that take place as you go into the afterlife. That was it. That was the end of the argument. Quite a few people have come up with different objections to that. I'd like to deal with the three best ones now. Okay, well, the first of these three challenges or arguments against the argument I made takes on this idea of the term eternal itself. When I talked about eternal, I was talking about an infinite period of time. And the problems that brings for temporally finite organisms such as ourselves. But there is another definition, and it's quite a legitimate definition to bring up, which is that eternal can mean an atemporal realm outside of time, without the dimension of time altogether. An atemporal existence rather than an existence in an infinite period of time. And of course that defeats the core of my argument, or it appears to, if you regard the core of my argument as the problem with an infinite period of time. But really the core of my argument was, how much is God going to have to lobotomise and tinker and tweak and alter us to make us compliant with heaven being an infinite period of time? What I can tell you is, however big the tweaking and tinkering and lobotomising would be for an infinite temporal realm, it's going to have to be 100 times bigger still for an atemporal realm. We are temporal beings. Everything about our consciousness and about our agency, about our actions, is temporal. So whatever arguments that I made for the infinite temporal realm are 100 times greater for an atemporal realm. Not only that, the fear of hell is based on hell being an infinite punishment, that it's the punishment that stretches on forever. If you're telling me that actually hell is an atemporal realm, and that basically the punishment in hell is just effectively instantaneous, well, there's absolutely fuck all to worry about. You've absolutely took away any fear that anybody should ever have about hell. So that's two reasons why that first argument isn't a very good argument. And yes, I did consider that before I made the video, but I ruled it out, and I ruled it out for those reasons. Let's move on to the second argument. Okay, well, the second argument was a very specific one, and it was based on this idea that I'd made, which was this process, this celestial lobotomy, this numbing process that you're going to need to go through, perhaps amongst other nicer sounding processes to prepare you for an infinite heaven, is going to numb you to a lot of the problems that you would experience, a lot of the suffering you may experience in hell, a lot of the bad things you might experience in hell, whatever hell consists of. And the answer was, well, no, maybe what happens is you only go through that process if you go to heaven, and if you go to hell, you remain in your present form. And it's actually a great argument, and I can't actually tackle that argument because I like the argument. It's a good argument. But what I've got to say is I've not seen anything in scripture, in traditional doctrine, that approximates even to this kind of an argument, that the process that you go through for hell is different to the process you go through for heaven in this kind of a way. And I can't see any contemporary Christians even making this kind of an argument. So the problem is then that you've basically got to pull this argument out your arse here today, here and now, with no history to the argument, which makes it a rather weak argument for a religious tradition that bases its belief on tradition. It makes it look a little bit tenuous to suddenly trump up this argument out of nowhere. Let's move on to the third argument. Okay, the final one was really the daddy of all these arguments. It was this one: Noel, you're not understanding that God is omnipotent, that he can do anything, that he can make you heaven compliant, whatever that takes. And of course, nowhere in my video did I even suggest that he couldn't. Of course he can. If he's omnipotent, of course he could do that. I wouldn't question that for a moment. But even Christians who proclaim their deity's omnipotence accept that he can't do things which are logically impossible, which are logically contradictory. He cannot make a square circle. It's a contradiction in terms. And similarly, if he takes me and does a series of processes that make it not me, that precludes that entity from being me. It's like a married bachelor. You can't be married and be a bachelor at the same time. You can marry off, God could marry off a bachelor, or he could turn a married man's wife into a pillar of salt and re-bachelorize him again. True, he can turn me into not me, and he could perhaps turn not me back into me, but he can't make not me me. And if the processes he has to employ are so significant, and my argument is that they would be, that what results can't really be described as me anymore, then it isn't me. Okay, well listen, I'm going to stop the video there because I've gone on for long enough. Jack, everybody else, thank you for watching this video. Jack, I think you played a game of theological whack-a-mole when it wasn't even an appropriate cop-out, let alone an appropriate thing to do. But I don't blame you for doing it, you know. These are pretty intractable issues. I can understand you not really wanting to tackle them head on. If I was a Christian, I wouldn't want to tackle them head on. Thank you for watching this video. Bye for now.